What if I told you that the engine of all human history wasn't about great kings or brilliant inventors, but something much, much simpler? Well, today we're going to unpack a powerful theory called Exchangism. It's this hidden feedback loop that has been quietly shaping our world for centuries.
So let's just start with the biggest question of all. What really drives progress? What creates wealth? We usually think it's all about technology, or maybe politics, or some lone genius having a eureka moment. But the theory we're exploring today suggests the real answer is way more fundamental. An engine that started turning with the very first cities.
And you know what? The core idea actually goes all the way back to Adam Smith in 1776. He famously said the division of labor is limited by the extent of the market. All that really means is you can't be a specialist, you can't be a master at just one thing, unless there are enough people out there who actually want to buy what you're making. Makes sense, right?
Now, Exchangism takes that classic idea from Smith and turns it into this incredible feedback loop. Just look at how this works. It starts when a market gets bigger. That lets organizations grow. And that growth, it allows for deeper and deeper specialization. That specialization makes everyone way more productive, which creates more wealth. And guess what that wealth does? It fuels even more market expansion. See, it's a cycle, a powerful engine that just keeps feeding itself.
Okay, so let's dive into this concept. It's so simple, but it's incredibly powerful. And to really get it, we've got to go back to Adam Smith's most famous example, a pin factory.
So Smith pointed out three big reasons why this division of labor is like a superpower. First, you get really, really good at what you do. Repetition makes you an expert. Second, you stop wasting time switching between different tasks. And third, and this is key, when you do one thing all day, every day, you're way more likely to figure out a better, faster way to do it. And the result of all this? It was just astonishing. Smith saw workshops boost their productivity by 240 to nearly 5,000 times. No, that's not a typo. That is the incredible power of just dividing up the work.
Okay, so this raises the big question, right? If having a big market is so crucial, what actually makes a market grow in the first place? Well, the theory says it comes down to two fundamental drivers that have literally shaped all of human history.
The first driver is super simple. It's just density. When people bunch together in a city, the cost of buying and selling stuff just plummets. All of a sudden, you've got tons of buyers and sellers right there in one place. This is what lit the fire for the very first civilizations. These dense cities created the first real markets, and that kicked off that powerful cycle of specialization and growth we were just talking about.
And the second driver? Efficient transport. Adam Smith had this perfect example. To get a shipment of goods from London to Edinburgh by sea, all you needed was one ship and maybe 8 guys. But to move that exact same amount of stuff by land? Whoa, you'd need 100 men and 400 horses. Water was about 14 times more efficient. And that simple fact explains why, for pretty much all of history, the wealthiest civilizations were the ones built along coasts and rivers.
So how does this whole idea of market size actually play out across history? Well, the theory of exchangism breaks it down into 3 really distinct stages.
You can see the evolution here, it's pretty clear. Stage 1 was all about local trade, happening right inside ancient cities. Then Stage 2 connected those cities into bigger regional networks, mostly using water. And Stage 3, well, that's the world we live in now, global trade, powered by massive companies. Let's take a quick look at each one.
So the first huge economic jump forward happened within city walls. By cramming people together, cities basically made transportation costs for local trade zero. This is what allowed blacksmiths and bakers and weavers to specialize for the very first time, because they knew they had a market right outside their door, and that created that amazing feedback loop of innovation and demand.
Okay, the next stage was all about connecting those cities. The civilizations that got really good at water transport, they created these huge regional markets. Think about the Romans unifying the entire Mediterranean, or Islamic merchants who dominated the Indian Ocean. You had the Hanseatic League connecting the North and Baltic Seas. Even in Japan, a massive domestic market was built purely on coastal shipping. In every single case, linking cities by water created enormous prosperity.
But going truly global, that required more than just better ships. It actually needed a whole new kind of organization. And this third stage is defined by the rise of these huge, complex corporations, like the famous Dutch East India Company. These were giant enterprises that could manage incredible amounts of money and thousands of people to build supply chains that stretched across the entire planet.
And this brings us to a really crucial way of rethinking the Industrial Revolution. We always picture steam engines and dark factories, but at its heart, it was a transport revolution. Canals and railways, those were the real game changers. They basically gave inland places their own coastline, connecting millions of rural workers to the global market for the very first time. All of a sudden, a spinner in some tiny English village could be making cloth for a customer in India. It's just mind-blowing.
So look, it's a really compelling story, but does the data actually back it up? Let's take a look at the numbers and see if this whole theory really holds water.
So on this chart, we're looking at the population density of 50 different countries way back in 1820, and we're comparing that to how wealthy they are today. Now, globally, the correlation is about 0.43. That's, it's pretty decent. But watch this. When we just look at the Western countries where this whole process really kicked off earliest, that correlation jumps to a very, very strong 0.66. It shows that being dense early on was a powerful predictor of being rich later on.
But what if we could test this inside a single country? Control for things like culture and politics. That's what makes the case of China so unbelievably fascinating. And the number you need to remember is this one, 0.61.
So what is that 0.61? That is the correlation between how dense China's provinces were in 1953 and how wealthy they were 70 years later. This is a huge deal because by looking inside one country, you filter out all that extra noise, like different political systems or cultural values. It isolates the raw power of market size. The connection is it's undeniable.
So, after all that history and all that data, let's bring it all home. What's the big takeaway from all of this?
The big idea here is that exchangism gives us this one single theory for progress. It's not just about one thing. See, expanding the market is what drives specialization and productivity. Expanding the size of the enterprise, the company, creates better incentives for everyone inside it. And expanding the exchange networks between them all, that's what unleashes real innovation. It all comes back to this one powerful idea, the scale of exchange.
And that leaves us with one final, pretty provocative question. For basically all of human history, the size of a market was limited by geography and transport. But now, right now, we live in a world of instant digital markets that connect billions of people. If this theory holds true, what does that mean for our future? What is the next great stage of exchange going to look like?